Okay, I think that should be recording. It is recording now.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
recording.
that is the square, okay.
They're both recording.
And this is recording.
Okay.
But look at what it's recording. It's recording the Lysol container.
Nope, it's not.
No, no.
Oh, it is. It's switched around.
It's switched around.
The camera switched.
Hit the button, hit the button.
Start this again.
That's what I do on my first
There
selfie.
you go.
There we go.
There we
Sorry,
go.
we got a picture of the Lysol can, that's a good one.
All right, call to order of the July 7th Committee of the Whole meeting. Thank you everybody for coming. Adoption of the agenda. Any questions, any thoughts on the agenda?
No. Looks pretty
I
good.
went over.
I so moved, we got the agenda.
Second it.
Favor? Okay, minutes, July 9th, I see we've done double-sided, saving trees, this is good. Okay, so. Review, everybody's names are correct. Date is correct.
Item 6, what is capital F, another F?
Probably the word follow,
Oh, okay.
we'll correct that.
I thought, oh boy, that's something new. Looks good.
Okay, so motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second it.
Favor? Okay, new business. So, item number 1 is basically some bookkeeping. And that is that we need to clean up our signing authorities on our bank accounts. And there are a number of past chairs who are still on that authorization list, and our past CAO is on that authorization list. So we need to have this in our minutes and signed minutes before the credit union will act upon it. So we may need to have a special process by which we approve our minutes after the board meeting so that we can get the minutes to the credit union more quickly than waiting a month's cycle to get it to them. But the proposal from our deputy admin is that we remove all signers that are currently on the account other than Janice Swanson, our deputy CEO, and Ted. And that we would add to that myself and Ian Ham. And we would say Ian Ham just to have another person who is often available as an employee of the regional district that could sign a check if needed, right? Because we're dropping, we'll get to the CAO replacement strategy, but until we have a permanent CAO in place, we should have 2 employees who can sign checks. That would be my thoughts on that.
Well, what about Janice, though?
Well, she can sign checks today.
Okay.
And so what we're saying is that we would have Janice and
I'm
Ian.
sorry, Lindsay.
We could do that, and Ian would be a more senior member of the team, right? So that I think is why that is recommended.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
And so the motion is to remove as signers on all Union Bay credit union accounts, including account 6494 operating account, account 594903 point of sale account, RBC account number 800-107-1349, business account, other than Janice Swanson and Ted Harrelson, to add as signers on the above mentioned accounts Ian Monroe and Ian Ham. So motion made.
I'll second it.
Discussion, which we've kind of already done.
No, it makes sense to me, and makes sense to have Ian also because he is more senior and around, he's around. So I'm good with it.
Regarding Ian signing, now, I don't know when you go back back to the previous fire chief, if he had any signing authority or whatever because of the CAO thing. I don't think he did. And I know, I can remember our CAO saying he was concerned when Ian came in that he might be spending too much money, this, that, and the other. And my feeling is, I don't think that has any substance to it. I think Ian is very responsible. I know if
This part of talking about employee responsibility and all that kind of stuff, we should try to keep that to in-camera types of discussions, so.
yeah. So anyhow, I think later on we should discuss a point that I'll bring up
Okay,
regarding the signing. Otherwise, I'm for what is put here in 3A. I agree with it.
anything?
No, I think it's the right thing to do.
The one thing I'll add to the idea of signing authorities, that I'm aware that our public works superintendent has a $500 signing authority. I am presuming our fire chief has a $500 signing authority, but we could confirm that, as to say, hey, we'd just like some documentation communicated to the board as to what the signing authorities are in place for all employees. Should we do that?
Yes,
Yeah, that'd be a good idea to review that for sure.
yeah.
I also, Mr. Chair, I think that also it should be reviewed. $500 in certain circumstances is probably not enough for the fire department or for Dan regarding certain things that are needed at a time, but we could turn around and set a limit, and anything over and above that limit would have to come to the board.
So let's move on from this for a second, and I'll come back to that and make a motion on that basis as well. So with respect to the motion that's on the floor right now, discussion, any further discussion, or should we just vote? All in favor? Okay. So I think what I heard coming up there, Ted, was that we have a motion to review and recommend appropriate signing authorities for each Union Day employee. And that might include, and they have none, right?
Right.
Yeah, or I guess we would express it as who has what signing authority. Okay, so motion on the floor.
You need a second or I'll
Yeah.
second it.
Any further discussion of that, or just put it out there and say, we'll ask our deputy CAO to do that?
No.
Okay, all in favor? Great. Item B, discussion of purchase of an office/bathroom trailer for the water treatment plant. So there's no motion here. It's more of a discussion item that would, in the event that we want to move it forward, would need to turn into a bylaw, right, because it will require a capital expenditure. The information associated with this is on the back of the minutes. There's an email from Janice on top of an email from Dan that supports the need of this, right? So Dan's email says that the Public Works Department is requesting $44,000 to purchase an office for staff use at the water treatment plant. Having basic access to a bathroom is a requirement of WorkSafe BC, and costs for similar units are $48,000 to $78,000 from Muchalat Construction, or Muchalat, I don't know how that's pronounced. There is a unit available for purchase from a private seller. The unit has one office, lunchroom, and bathroom with room for lockers and storage. This is a self-contained unit with water tank and septic tank. However, electricity will have to be hooked up, and also moving costs. So there will be additional costs beyond the $44,000, and we'll go from there. So we've got from Janice up front, right, is that the office was part of the scope of work for the water treatment plant due to the WorkSafe BC COVID safety plan requirements. The WTP must have a bathroom with hand washing, access, etc. We're working on the WorkSafe required COVID safety plan at the moment. At the present time, the staff has no office or indoor bathroom at the WTP. WTP. The plant is extremely loud when it is not running, it is extremely loud when it is running. It is very difficult to have a telephone conversation when it is not running, almost impossible when it is. Our concern is that if WorkSafe BC became aware that we do not have a COVID safety plan, it would inspect the water treatment plant and we would be issued an order to rectify. We are trying to stay ahead of this happening by getting the office bathroom with shower for chemical exposure. I spoke to Graham of Myers Norris Penny, our auditors, and he said there is plenty of money available for this necessary project.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Did the plans not include an office and a bathroom, the building plans for the plant?
No, can I answer?
Yep, totally.
Yeah, no, we went through that and it was gonna add a lot of cost to the treatment plant, and it was actually suggested that because of the noise and the chemical exposure and that it would be best to have a remote
Separate, okay.
office, and it was always our understanding, and I believe that I don't know if we made a motion past it, there was to be a trailer purchased and put up there rather than building an office, and the thought too was, if our fire hall is built, rather than spending a lot of money for an office up at the treatment plant, that the actual improvement district office would be part of the fire hall. So you could scale down whatever you had up there if you had to, so that was a consideration of having kind of a minimal remote type office washroom as part of the treatment plant.
But according to Janice, it sounds like there's funding for it, like.
Yeah,
The
and,
money was part of the budget for the.
Yeah,
that's
okay.
right.
My understanding of how that goes is that it was always considered in scope for the water treatment plant project. It was not contracted as part of the construction.
Right.
Yeah.
And therefore it is not a part of the capital outlays that had been authorized. That was for the construction project. So what we're talking about here now is a bylaw to disperse additional capital funds from our reserves, and that Myers Norris Penny is telling us that we're in good shape reserves wise and there's plenty of money to do this.
Okay,
That's my understanding of how this comes together.
well, it makes complete sense, we have to have.
Mr. Chair, that was the thing, the water treatment plant was to be completed and operating first before this unit came in, so that there was going to be no confusion where it's going to go, and not have to dig up something and change something because now all of a sudden this thing has to come in. So it was a two-part thing, and we need to get the second part done. If possible, ASAP. I don't know how long it's going to take, but it shouldn't take that long. Power hookup is probably the longest thing that it's going to take. They already have a septic tank system right there on site, so that's an easy hookup. So, because it's cold in that plant, I was there when she was there, and her hands trying to sit there on the computer and do things that need to be done,
So this trailer, does it have a shower or?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. That might have to be increased on whatever chemical cleanup or something like that, but I'm pretty sure that can be incorporated in that trailer quite easily.
Is there not a rinse station already in the?
Yeah, there is.
There's a rinse station, yeah, but
It's not a full
again,
shower.
Yeah, and that's the protocol.
Oh,
we
there's
use
not a
at
full
chemicals.
no,
Oh.
no.
No, if the
In
trailer.
the plant itself, there's a rinse station, but that's it.
oh, I see, no, but the trailer needs a shower.
The trailer has a
It
shower.
has a shower.
Okay,
Yeah, it has a three-piece.
So
okay.
the only thing that's missing here for me is to understand the additional costs, right? So we have a power hookup and the moving costs. I can't imagine that there's super substantial, but you can imagine having to raise wires and things like that to move it. I don't know if not, it's probably not that tall. But we then also, there is a septic holding tank in it. We do have another tank that is already there.
Yeah, it can be diverted, that
Could be diverted
capped
into
off.
that. So I'd like the plan to perhaps get just fleshed out a little bit to say it's 44,000 plus how much?
Yeah. Are we talking about, I think what you might want to do though, rather than digging up the whole parking lot and everything, is just move the holding tank with it, And leave it as that, and whenever they go and pump out the stuff, the contaminants, that they would just pump out the tank as well. I don't know.
It's like a
Because
trailer holding tank, it's
Yeah.
right on the unit.
it's on the unit itself, so rather than, doing a whole bunch of excavation and piping and, I don't know,
Yeah.
just.
Yeah, well, let's
suggest-
ask them to say what's the plan, right?
Yeah,
For that as well, because as I understand it right now, we are having a septic company come and pump out the,
effluents,
it's basically organic material that isn't sewage.
Yeah.
But it is going into the sewage treatment plant, and there is work being done to say, will the waste management facility accept it instead? And that would reduce our costs by like 90% in terms of waste disposal. So that would then mean we would have two different processes, but also a need to keep sewage separate from organic materials.
yeah, you're right, that's a good point, where the trailer should stay on its own, because if we do get approval to put the effluent into just the waste site then
Yeah,
we couldn't put that, yeah.
You'd have to have a holding tank in the ground if that was the case. I don't, pardon me for stepping in, I'm not sure now, if a septic truck comes and pumps out that tank, because there's no field, if that's the case, that affluent is probably going to the pet stock up at the water treatment plant, or I should say the secondary treatment plant, and it'll be going in to their process and into a digester.
Yeah, it is now.
Along with sewage, so I can't see a problem.
well, it would be, and it is now actually, that organic material that is bubbled off the top of, which, is really just loam coming out of or peat coming
Yeah,
out
that's
of the
peat.
lake, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of it.
Oh, sure.
Oh yeah, there's a bunch.
This is gonna be an ongoing issue.
It has to be done.
That's part of the process.
Yeah, part of the costs of operating the plant. So I guess we need to make sure that there's a full feasibility done here is, will VHA or whoever approves the installation of that trailer up there, is there a permit required to do that? I would assume there is.
If you have to put in a septic field, yeah.
But is there a permit required to move a trailer onto that site? I think we need this full plan fleshed out a little bit, right? And saying that there's, some tentative approval here for this, but in order for us to pass a bylaw, I think we want to know the full plan before we do it.
Yep. Yeah, we need to know all three details. And then if it's the case, we gotta apply for permits to get there.
So we want to request PW superintendent provide a full budget and approval process, right? That will allow the creation of a bylaw.
And Mr. Chairman, also when that trailer comes in, I'm sure that there'll be the cost of skirting it as well and closing it. That's probably another added cost.
Okay, so I'll put in there including, it's additional costs including moving, hookup, permitting, skirting. Anything else?
Hydro and septic hookup, so you'll need permits for each.
Well, the septic is self-contained, so.
Yeah, but I'm just saying if
If it
you
is.
allow it to go into the holding system.
Okay, so the motion is request Public Works Superintendent to provide a full budget and approval process, including additional costs. Let's start again here, I've got my writing all over the place. Okay, so motion is to request the Public Works Supervisor to provide a full budget that includes additional costs, including moving, hookup, permitting, skirting, and the approval process that will allow the creation of a bylaw for approval by the board.
I so move.
Second,
Second.
any more discussion?
No, well, no.
All in favor? And I think we're communicating to our public works superintendent that we are in favor of moving this forward. We just don't have enough information to approve it at this point in time.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay. Item C, another discussion, and which may result in motions. We've restarted. Yeah, so we have a logistics process so that we need to, sort of flow through to say, what would timing look like, right? And there's probably some options in there as to what comes first, but I think it'll probably sort itself out reasonably nicely. And then we'll just have to, make sure it works for everybody. But here's the information that I received, really, right? With respect to election options, basically, this discussion was with Catherine Lee with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And she's basically saying that there is lots of leeway here for us in that the legislation doesn't speak directly to improvement districts with respect to elections. And that a lot of improvement districts don't hold separate elections. They're a part of their AGM. And so therefore they're a smaller event. So whatever we end up doing, we will have to modify our elections policy, because our elections policy currently spells out that we have a separate election, we have one advance poll, and that we have one general poll, right? So our options really is that we could, do whatever we want here, and we could do any or all of the following, right? We could have multiple advance polls, where, you say, hey, let's do 3 days instead of 1 day, which spreads out the load of people, right? Well, certainly we're going to add costs to doing that, because you've got more people that are working as scrutineers, or not scrutineers, but elections officers and all those sorts of things. But that is certainly something available to us, that we can spread this out, make it more, less crowds, less temptation to all pack in 1 day, right? The other option that we have is mail balloting. And so mail balloting has its own challenges, for sure. It's administratively onerous and complex, because you have to get secrecy envelopes and all sorts of things that people can put their ballot in. The envelope has that kind of fancy printing on the inside of it that you can't see, and that you can sign and seal it on the outside, and all those sorts of things. People do tend to have trust issues with it. That said, the ministry is going to put that was a comment from Catherine, not my editorial on that, there's a template coming from the ministry for mail balloting. And the additional comment she made is all of those comments are related to business as usual, normal times. And will there be a different appetite from people to adapt to processes like that? Particularly if you said, we are going to have mail balloting and advance polls and a general poll, right? That gave people all kinds of different comfort as to how to get in. And what you then have to get into is lining up your dates, right? To say, okay, mail balloting closes on this date, so that we can appropriately cross all names that have already voted off the mailer list, so that you can now go to general polls, right? Right. There's one more thing that comes into this, right, is that we're still pursuing this idea of redefining ownership, or who can vote, from you're on title to this declaration of substantial interest in a property. That's that statutory declaration that says a spouse not on title can, in certain circumstances, vote. And how do you apply that in a mail ballot, for example, right? That gets pretty complex as to what might happen there, and probably even increase the odds of spoiling more ballots as to going through that. So we might have to address that if we went down the mail ballot route that says if you cannot use a mail ballot in combination with a statutory declaration, for example. We might say that. And then the overall thing around elections is whatever we decide to do must comply with provincial health rules. And she emphasized that word, saying the ministry's stuff up for us on elections is guidelines and guidance. The provincial health officers' items are rules, they have to be followed, right, in terms of social distancing and all those sorts of things, right? So, we could go as far if we thought it was appropriate to say anybody who comes to a voting poll must wear a mask.
Going one way and out the other.
Yeah, arrows on the floor, all that stuff, social distancing lines, everything, right? So that's elections. I'd rather not move into AGM until maybe there's some questions around this, and then I can lay out AGM, and then we can try to fit the pieces together here.
So it sounds like, first of all, we already have three voting options with our current election policy. We have an advance poll. No, we have just two. Okay. Yeah, we have an advance poll, the AGM, and then after the AGM. And that was done because there was serious questions in our community about process, given some negative experiences when we had, which I was present for, when we had an election during the AGM. We used to have them during the AGM just like everyone else. So I actually prefer our policy system. I think it's very well laid out. Adding a third polling day, I think, is a good idea. I personally feel for the people who are in the category of high risk for COVID, which are over 60 and or with immune disorder or cancer, that mail-in ballots should very much be an option. I personally don't have any trust issue with them whatsoever. We discussed the statutory declaration previously, and I believe we all felt it was important that that be done ahead of time, and that people come forward to the office and with their spouse or whatever, and set up that, do the statutory declaration ahead of time. So I think all those things could be accomplished. I'd like to see mail-in ballots. I'd like to see the statutory declaration be announced to the public and done properly. And I'd like to see 3 polling days. I think that's a really good idea. I also want us to call the nominations as per our policy, which is a month ahead of time, which would coincide with the announcement for the AGM. So I'm totally open. I know that we can do just a one-way enter, exit. I know that we can make sure that there's no more than 5 or 10 people in the actual hall at any one time. We can even get numbers and people wait in their car out in the parking lot. Like, we really do have a lot of options for, I believe, for making sure that this is safe for everyone.
I'm sure that those guidelines gotta be followed with COVID the way it is. We don't have a vaccine, and yes, some people could be very susceptible, and it could be very health damaging.
Yeah. And wiping and cleaning the pencils that are used for the balloting, and all the cleaning stuff we can do.
I'd be happy to have giant boxes of pencils that are single use.
That's right,
Yeah.
single use, and then you just throw it in the box when you're done.
Yeah.
But it's a case, I think, yeah, we can do it. Again, it's gonna take a bit of organizing. I just don't wanna turn around and have what happened the last time, where we started to have an election and everything, and of course, hit the floor with the COVID, and we still had to turn around and sign a check for $4,000 for an election that really never took place. I don't wanna go through that again. If we're gonna, spend the extra time and the trouble to get to get the ballots and everything done. I just don't wanna end up having the same thing that we had the last time, which means we still had to turn around and pay that money out for the election. That never happened because he canceled the election.
Pay 4,000 to whom?
4,000
For what?
for the election.
But,
To the election
To
officer.
the election officer, we still had to pay $4,000 out.
So,
And I don't wanna see that happen again. I do want us to have an election, and Chairman Colger, I'm sure that we can, I just wanna make sure that it works. That the trouble,
Yeah,
the
that we
time,
go
the
through
trouble
with it,
that
for
we go
sure.
through with it.
Me too.
We're not gonna end up getting burnt again. You gotta make sure that the election officer is gonna say, okay, we can do this.
yeah, I think we have to have that as part of our approval, and we'll note that, right, that we want our CEO to approve our plan. What we can't ever control is second waves of the virus.
I know it's a chance.
And greater restrictions imposed by the chief health officer. We can't control those things, right? We can, try to predict ahead if we see it coming and say, don't pull the trigger on this.
Right now it's a good time right now.
yeah, I agree.
A few months from now, who knows what it's gonna
Yeah.
be, but right now is really a good time to go ahead and get it.
Well, it wouldn't be right now because we have a month. We have a month nomination period, but I agree sooner than later.
Yeah.
Let me throw some more information on the table here
Okay.
with the AGM.
Well, just, I wanna speak on
Sorry,
that.
yeah, sorry.
I think it's a great idea that we have more advanced polls. I know the mailing thing sounds like a good idea. I think what would happen though, we need to research it a little more. How long of duration is it before the election? Because I really would like to see this election being held in at least September. If we get into October, then, if there are people waiting outside, it would be, bad weather. I think it would,
We're into flu season again then too.
yeah,
I think we're all on.
Yeah, the mailing thing's a good idea, but I think it could be costly, and then it would have to be completed in a lag time before the actual election. So it could drag it out.
It would extend it.
The other part of,
Sorry, I shouldn't have said anything, let's let her finish.
if we did have some way with the advanced poll, first off, we had a separate time for the older people that they could actually maybe register or something, that they could come in separately, that would help that. And then secondly, have some kind of a simple idea, and I'm just throwing this out here, like odd house numbers, even house numbers come one day, and try and do something, or alphabetically. I'm just throwing things out for suggestions, that we break it up so that we try and, if we are gonna have more days for advanced polls, that we actually take advantage of the days and just don't assume that people are gonna spread themselves out, is we control that somehow. So, first off, I suggest that we have a time for the elderly people, that they could actually say they're coming, or some way of controlling that. And then breaking it up where we control how many people are coming each day, so.
Okay?
How the stores have been doing it for the separate time for the elderly and people with compromised is first thing in the morning, before actually opening hours. So, on that note, for our voting times, I'd like to see it go from 8 until 6 p.m. to give people time who work beyond 9 to 5. It was always a bit early, like 5. Anyway, I'd like to see a little bit of a longer day and a separate time. Perhaps the morning seems to be the time for the older people to vote, and just have that be the case for every single election day. But
We've been doing, has it been 8 hours?
it's been less. It's been like.
I think it has to, by law, it has to be 8 hours, if I remember right. The polls
minimum
have-
of 8 or exactly 8?
I think they have to be open 8 hours at a minimum.
Yeah.
I think it was.
And we were probably doing that. where it might have been like 9 to
5.
5, yeah.
So I think it should be at least
Yeah.
8 to 6. But anyway, have the first 2 hours, for example, be for
Yeah.
the elderly and or compromised.
I think we could, kind of control how, we're taking advantage of having spread out time, but I think we need to control how it actually we're taking advantage of it.
I was still talking, sorry.
Yeah.
The mail-in ballots, how elections are done with mail-ins, or mail-ins are counted afterwards. In other words, there isn't a waiting for the mail, no, they're called absentee ballots. So absentee ballots can be sent in, in our provincial, like people who are military, who absentee ballots are handed out early, but they can be mailed in at any time, and they are often counted after the main election. And sometimes they're not even counted if the results are really like sweeping one way or the other. They're counted when there is a very close tie. So I'm just saying, they don't have to be done ahead of time as well. Like, they don't have to be opened and counted before the election.
Well, that's what Ian said had to happen.
Well, I actually, that's the discussion I had with Catherine, that was our discussion, but I don't think there was any thing, if I conveyed official opinion or official process in that wasn't the case. What we discussed was having to manage one person, one vote.
Yeah, and I think
That's the part, yet somehow, no matter which way you do it, if somebody requests an absentee or a mail-in ballot, then they must be stricken from the
They are.
in-person voting list, right?
You got to count it
Yeah,
first.
and therefore, if you don't execute your mail-in ballot and you show up, it's gonna be, where's your mail-in ballot? Right, you have to be able to control it, be one person, one vote in some way. You're correct that if we did it that way, that we tick them off the list upon request. Would also save us costs of mailing out ballots to everybody, right? That we would then just say, here's your ballot.
Yeah. I was never thinking of mailing out ballots to everybody, but that it would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, regarding these ballots going out, is there not some way that we can turn around through the water bills or whatever that's going through, that a letter can go out asking for them to phone into the office if they wish to have an absentee ballot? And a list can be made so these ballots can be given to these people?
The problem being is the letters are probably going up next week, the bills, right?
Well, that's why I'm saying a note put in there. with-
Well, we have to have all our
yeah.
process together by then, right? We'd have to,
Can't you do that? No, that's all right, I understand.
well, we hadn't got to the part where I was gonna ask for volunteers here.
Well,
Because it
I
can't
knew
be
that
always
was
like
coming.
clarity.
Okay, but yeah, there's gotta be some way, like Trustee Calder said, if we could do that, we could save money at the same time if people could call in or leave a note or whatever with their name, their address, if they wish to have that happen. And then that way we know how many are gonna get those.
Yeah.
And the rest would have to go through the regular process.
We can also do public postings like you do for elections at each mailbox, right? Where you
Yep.
say, here's the election dates. There will be an event or a request for mail-in ballots. If you request a mail-in ballot, you will not be eligible to vote in person.
Right.
But here's how you go about requesting it.
And then call the office and your name
Yeah.
and your address
Yeah.
and have them sent to you.
Yeah.
Would there be restrictions to who could get a mail-in ballot, or would you allow everybody?
That's a
Should
good
be
question.
anybody who
I think it could be anybody.
Yeah, it should be
Yeah,
anybody
that's
who asks.
good.
You can't demand personal medical information. You should leave it open for people to use their
Yeah.
discretion, whether they fit over 60 or whether they have a compromising illness.
That would cover everybody.
Yeah.
I think if we're gonna do mail-in ballots, you do mail-in ballots, that they're available to everyone. I think we have to make sure that we do understand those restrictions around it, basically saying, we'll have to explain the statutory declaration thing, but, I don't know how you do a stat dec and a mail-in together, right?
Well, you don't.
Yeah.
that's
You
not
say if you're gonna do a
crazy.
statutory declaration, you have to vote in person.
Yeah,
Yeah,
then you have to come in.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. So the AGM also has to be posted around the community, the notification of that. So we could also add that election info to those postings.
Yeah.
Just by way of
Mhm.
getting the information out there, in addition to the mail-in water bill.
Did you say though that you felt the mail-in ballots were expensive? I know I've done some ballots for like, you know, investment companies and stuff like that, and there you got an envelope, and oh, I think it was actually the provincial election that I voted in, where there's a security envelope
Yeah.
and an envelope and a,
Yeah, 2 envelopes.
yeah, so.
Yeah, I was
They can't
thinking
do
about
that.
mailing it to everybody, right?
Oh, it hadn't gone off, good. I turned it off.
So, I think that's it for AGM. So, trustee Culture.
We have to learn to be comfortable with electronic anyway for the report for the conversion project. So now I'm not sure what you mean by electronic meeting. I'm assuming that the AGM would be recorded and then posted immediately, not months later, immediately, for all to see. You don't need some kind of calling in situation. Like, I'm not sure what you mean by,
I mean a live stream, which would be on the website, which you could watch real time.
okay. So yes, so I think we have to do that. I think we need to learn to get comfortable with that because that may well be the future. May not be going away, as well as it will be something that we need to set up for the conversion. So I'm all for that. In addition, that would cut down the number of people who want to attend in person.
That's the purpose of it, right?
Yeah.
Is to bring the numbers down.
Yeah,
Trustee Harrelson.
Live streaming is, for a certain group of people, that's for sure, there's no doubt about that, especially with the COVID going on. The other thing is the number of people that can be out in that room at one time is limited. I don't know if you can turn around and have an AGM where you have 60 people come in and sit down and listen, and then they march out the other door and another 60 come in and sit down and listen to it all over again. I don't know if that works. It's pretty rough to be able to do that. It might have to be a combination of each. It's something we've never had to do before. So,
I guess the other question, is it necessary to do?
Well,
We've considered it that way, right? Is it necessary to have an AGM in the midst of this?
well, the thing
Necessary to
is,
have an AGM.
it's pretty hard not to have one, but
we have to
again,
have an AGM.
Well, we've been told we can postpone it.
yep, I understand, all the rest of the governments are.
Yeah. It's, how does it tie into elections as well, right? Like you want this to work very transparently, but we should have all options on the table to say, oh, okay, so we say we have to, do we know why we have to? And it might be we want to, and it's very highly recommended, but do we have to? And so I want us to consider everything, right? I'm not saying don't have one, I'm just saying, do we have to have one?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't think we have to have one, but we do have to have an election.
We have
It's
to
not
have an
fair
AGM.
to Susanna or Rick to
We
be,
have to have an AGM.
Time out here, Ted's speaking.
I'm saying election either by having an election of 3 people or having appointed 3 people, whichever is going to work. But the thing is, that's one thing we do have to have is an election for the board. Because it's not fair to you, Susanna, or to Rick, to have to be going for more and more months. And, I appreciate you both being here, absolutely appreciate it. But that is one thing we need, is an election. An AGM can come down the road when it's safe to do so, or whatever we decide we're going to do regarding an AGM, whether it be through electronic means or otherwise. as I say, it's new territory for me and for this community. It's never been done before. But again, you know, you look at Parliament in Ottawa, same thing. How many people show up in the Parliament for the whole country? 35 people instead of 200 and whatever. It's the times right now. The most important thing is the safety of everybody. So whatever way we can work it around that we can get the work done, you know, is to figure it out. Thanks. Go ahead, Rick.
I think in all of this, I've been involved in a couple of governance study conversations, you know, and, you know, as I listen to it more and more, even yesterday, it's very evident that this referendum is going to be put off, probably for an indefinite amount of time, because to get the information correct, there's a lot of issues that have to be resolved. And you know, I think it was mentioned yesterday that we're talking about a November-December referendum, and I absolutely don't think that we should be delaying our AGM or our election until the referendum is held. I believe it's actually flawed doing that. I think that the AGM and the election will show us actually the results of what we're going to be looking at in the referendum. And it's critical that, you know, let's say by some miracle there was 3 trustees elected that want to save UBID in the biggest way, right? And we're willing to commit to 3 years of turning it around and getting it done. And the community gets behind that and they're the right people, that could change the referendum. Or if the community doesn't elect that and they elect 3 people that are very interested in going to the regional district, then so to me it has to be done strategically soon, you know, September, before the referendum really gets going and the information's out there. And the election is going to decide the outcome of the referendum, basically, in my mind. I could be wrong, but that's just the way I see it. So I think it's critical we get going on the AGM. It has to be done. The idea of live streaming for part of the audience out there is a great idea. I think we could, you know, mark out the hall. If we get 60 people in there, you know, our AGMs traditionally, we have had, you know, 100 people at times. There's a lot of people that probably won't come because of that, you know, the pandemic. But, you know, registering it is a good idea. It's just, you know, we're going to have to appoint somebody to look after that, and it's kind of an onerous job. But I think that's the way I see it, and the sooner we get the election done, I believe the referendum is going to be offset, and it could even be into January, February. And I think it's really important to get 3 trustees elected. And it's actually going to be the voice of the community, basically, on how the referendum is going to go.
So I don't know if I have much to add here, other than for us to figure out how all this sorts together. An AGM to me is, you know, it's really had the ability to present the financial reports. It's had the ability to meet election candidates. It's had an ability for landowners to come in and ask questions, understand what's going on. Am I missing anything else that really goes on there? Or is it, you know, it's a formal requirement, or has been seen that way anyways, as a formal requirement for, you know, that passage between boards.
And the finance, you're right on the finance.
Yeah,
that's it.
and appointing director compensation, like that gets voted on at the AGM, right? So there's a few things like that that are there, right? But that said, you know, you kind of go, okay, so we have to start now. You got a month for call for nominations, right? So here we are, beginning of August. We then fire up in August and say, okay, when are our polls? I think there's a minimum 10-day or something. I can't remember the exact days that are in there. And then you then have an AGM. And at that, the other thing that we have to schedule into this is an open house. And, you know, if you had an AGM, would you do an open house with it? Like, would you combine those events together, right? I don't know. But
Where did the open house come from?
the referendum must have an open house. We have to
We're not
communicate.
talking about doing the referendum at the same time.
Would you let me speak, please? Please, I don't interrupt you.
I'm confused.
I will explain it. We are talking about a referendum. You cannot have a referendum without having an open house before it, so it has to be a part of the calendar. So in this process, we have to plan for that open house as well. It is relevant in our calendar. So what you're looking for is, and I said this word at the meeting yesterday with CBRD, which is I am very concerned about voter fatigue and event fatigue with how many times we make people show up and do something. And, you know, we are at important times for this community. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I am 100% committed to letting people make a good decision. But I am 100% committed to them having the right information to do that, and therefore the open house is critically important to this process. So we have to factor all of that into how we bring this together, right? So I will now stop and just say, I'm thinking about this whole calendar straight through, right? And that if you say open house and AGM in September, an election finishes in September, and then we have a referendum, you know, like if we're starting to push it out into October, we're now starting to push it into bad weather again, right? And now we're starting to talk about not everybody wanting to come out and vote on one of the most important issues that we have. All right, so I want us to think it all through. Say, Trustee Caldry, thank you for allowing me to finish.
So, according to our letters patent, the AGM is not an optional thing. It is very much a required thing before the end of April 30th. The public, for no fault of our own, has been out of the loop for basically the last 2 years and are very fed up. That's why it's important to have the AGM. Having the financial information is part of the decision-making process for the referendum. You're right, they're all tied together. The only thing that we're waiting on unless there's new information from the CBRD meeting that I didn't attend, and I hope somebody will bring it up if that's true, in terms of the referendum, is the report. So the open house is the dissemination of the report, correct? That's what the open house, when
Yes.
you say open house, okay.
Yes.
So was there any indication from the CBRD that there's some delay or hold up with that report that the conversion study is doing?
Yes.
Oh, what's the delay?
Both COVID and they didn't have all of the information they needed. So they now have all that information. The report, the draft report is targeted for the end of July now as opposed to the end of June. And then there will be a series of working committee meetings that are designed to finalize that report, and then we can consider the communication of that information to the landowners through an open house, right? So we're talking about not having a final report I'm going to assume mid to end of August. How would you phrase it?
That's what I would say.
And a final report that we've all vetted by the end of August.
Yes.
So theoretically, it sounds like therefore, an open house referendum could be in September.
Yes.
Okay. Well,
an open house is different than a referendum, right?
well, I'm putting the two together, given we've all talked about the timing of a second wave and the concern around a second wave.
Did that beep? Or is that
I
something
heard
else?
a beep, I don't know.
Or was that your thing?
No, it's still going.
Okay. I understand what you're saying about voter fatigue. I agree. We all agree that the people need the information. They need accurate and clear information before they vote. So, I think we're wise to, are you thinking we could do an AGM and an open house at the same time?
I proposed it as a possibility.
I didn't actually hear that as a possibility.
I did put it out there saying, could we?
Okay,
I also put it out there, could we miss an open house, or sorry, an AGM? I don't think we can miss an open house, it must happen.
we cannot miss an AGM, I'm sorry. It's in our letters patent, along with the election of the trustees. I'm not sure where you think we can miss it. Yes, we could
Yeah.
postpone it, but we cannot miss it. I don't see how we can.
I'll accept that as your opinion for sure, right? So I don't have it, for myself, I don't have a definitive answer to that. I really want our
We were
guidance on
guided about postponing, but it's very clear in the letters patent that we have to have an AGM. Anyway, I think we can do it all in September. And I'd like to see us move on the AGM and the election, as we previously discussed.
Good. Susanna, you good?
Yeah.
Ted?
Yeah, under the letters patent, it's true, there has to be an AGM. It can be postponed for one reason or other. COVID is one reason. But again, we don't know where this is going when it comes to COVID. That it's got a mind of its own. It's a bit of a balancing act. The governance study, and again, the public being able to be educated on which way they want to vote is it's probably the most critical thing that Union Bay is going to be facing, period. And people have to be able to know about it. They have to be able to ask questions. They have to be able to see the pros and the cons so that they can make a vote that they feel comfortable with. Again, an election of 3 new trustees needs to happen. It's imperative that happens. An AGM, well, as I say, it can be postponed for specific reasons. Not because we want it, but because of specific reasons. And I hope it will come together. I really do. It's, again, timing is everything. We get later into the year, we get into the flu season again on top of whatever this COVID thing is going to do. And I wouldn't want to be going that far if we can get it done sooner.
You done, Ted?
I'm done.
Yeah, so for me, I think it's just critical that, I don't think we should worry about the governance study with what we have to accomplish with the AGM and the election. I can see that there's so many unknowns with that governance study. They don't even know how many kilometers of pipe we have, right? I think that we need to be rational about it, and right now is the time to move forward with it. If we delay it in any way, shape, or form, second wave, bad weather, all of that sort of stuff, I think if we move now, the election I would see in September, have August to get organized. August would be a very bad time to have an election. There's a lot of, could be people away, not as many as normal. But, starting in September, the first 2 weeks of September, have the AGM maybe the first week of September, or I forget how it goes, yeah, right. That's what I see, and I don't think we should try and control what we have to accomplish by worrying about the governance. The governance study is an animal of its own, and it's going to evolve as it evolves, and I don't think there's any, it was mentioned yesterday, I think by Warren from the regional district, that he is thinking of a November, December referendum, right? And it seems every time we discuss this, it moves. It's a moving goalpost. So I think, you know, we got a lot of stuff to accomplish where we are defined to the fact that we have to have an AGM. So let's do that. Let's have an election. And then, you know, as it falls into place with the governance study, fine. If not, we've accomplished what we have to accomplish. And I think it will actually set it up better for the referendum if we have our election and our AGM and that information's out. I think it's a better choice for the people to know who their trustees are. And again, I think the election will define the referendum. So that's my take on it.
I'll be brief. The only comment I have is I can't see not trying to get the open house done as quickly as possible. Like,
Yeah.
people are hungry for that information. And I can accept the idea of separating the referendum from the election, although that does cause me some grief in terms of this idea of electoral fatigue, right? So, you know, there's a natural thing for me that says,
So, we all agree that we want to proceed as quickly as possible with our election, our AGM. What about if we, given that the report is moving along according to schedule, what about if we plan, if possible, to have the open, like we will schedule, there's a bunch of dates we have to schedule. We can schedule the open house with the idea that we might be able to run the referendum in addition to, as part of the election. So in other words, proceed. The only thing we would be doing differently is scheduling an open house day, because that's separate from AGM and election days. And proceed on the idea that maybe we will be able to have the referendum be included in the election. But like that sort of plan, you know, that's it's not the overriding issue. It's the sub issue. Does that make sense?
I think what I heard you say is similar to what I said, which
Yeah.
was the election and AGM take precedence. The open house is very important to fit into that.
To schedule it.
And that your preference is for the referendum to happen with the election, but you're not hung up on it.
Yeah. The election has to happen with or without the referendum, period. Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Yep.
Any more? Or do we need to get to?
No, I have to agree with that. When it comes to the regional district and this referendum and the way they go about things, we might be waiting longer than we think, so, but we do need to elect new officials and we do need to have an AGM. We need to get that post.
And the report
That
out.
better report out.
Yeah.
Okay,
So can we make
Just
a
one
motion?
last thing, I think, what I'm thinking is we can control the AGM and the election. We cannot control the report and the open house. That's beyond our scope. We're part of that, but we can't set a date and we can't move it forward. So, you know, I believe that we should do what we can control and get our AGM going, get our election going. The timing is pretty good if we get going now, that we could have it organized in a timely fashion before something could change once again. And so that's kind of my mindset on it, is let's do what we can do ourselves. And if the other, and I think it's almost reiterating what you said, that if it happens, we try and fit it in. If not, we proceed.
Yeah. Do we need a motion?
I'm just writing one out here right now.
Okay. I didn't bring a calendar. Does anybody have a calendar?
Let me just get this motion out first then.
least look at some of the dates. Or, I don't know if we need to do that now, but
I think we've got enough time that we can,
we want to follow the policy too, in terms of nominations, call for nominations, AGM.
To me, the issue here is if we say prepare a plan for our approval, we're waiting till next month, right? And that
Yeah.
means calls for election vote in August instead of in July, right?
Yeah,
So I think what we have to do here is get something together that says, prepare the plan that shall be approved via email, like we want it to happen as soon as possible. And
Yeah.
could it be done for our board meeting? Could it?
I doubt it. I doubt it can be, right? We could try it, but that's 9 days.
To
Right.
just pull up the dates and so on?
Well, and to get it all sorted out as to how we're gonna do it. Like, that's the problem here. We can't just say, do a normal election, right? We have to figure out, well, how are we gonna do the election too? You know, can we say call for nominations and that there's going to, but there has to be an election day set on that, and there has to be an AGM set, so we have to get all that stuff done, right? So I think, how does that, this is my ignorance in this, and you guys have been around it longer than me. How does an election require a motion of the board to kick it off?
no, it requires a motion to set the date for the AGM, and then the timing is already there, right? Like, you know, you time your election with your AGM, and we've kind of screwed that up a couple of times, but I think we got it figured out now.
Well, do we want to do that? Do we want to have this? So this is about the election, and that we want to have a motion to set a date for the AGM.
And I think
Separate.
actually, if we did that, if we set the dates now,
Yeah,
and we've got 7 weeks to get her done, that might be the best way, right? And,
Yeah.
and we could always, if there's an issue, move the date, I guess, but I think we should try that, that's probably the best.
What if we set a date for the AGM,
yeah.
and then
Work.
get
The call for
our,
nominations
and we've got
works
some,
backwards.
yeah, and we've got some discussions to happen around that in camera, right?
Yeah,
And get our admin to then say, okay, the AGM is this date, make an election work around that.
yeah, with an extra polling day. We have now advanced poll and then the election poll, we want 2 advanced polls.
But we could still, we don't have to make that firm right now,
No,
Suzanne.
no, I know, we have to pick the AGM, I get
Yeah,
that, but.
and then build off of
And
that.
build off of that,
Yeah.
but we're adding in one more election day,
Yeah,
over
yeah,
and above.
very
our
likely.
policy, Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're looking at September, you got September's map there, or map?
Yeah, and like, September 1st is a Tuesday.
Also a holiday.
The holiday's the 7th, I believe,
It's
is
the
Labor Day.
first Monday.
Yeah, September 7th is Labor Day.
And we have Tuesday elections, is that what we've been doing, or is it Thursday?
No,
Well, what
it's
else?
always Thursday, because they work.
Or
they used to
Saturday.
be- No,
No, but
Well,
so September 3rd
the
would be
AGM
the
is
first
first.
Thursday, which would probably be really good, and then the election would kick off. After that, it's usually 2 weeks following.
it's the advance poll is one day ahead of the AGM, and then there's an election day after the AGM. So there's one ahead of the AGM and one after.
I thought that the candidates came to the AGM.
They do, that's why there's the full day is after the AGM.
Okay, I can't remember exactly how it is. So, you know, you either would have your AGM, maybe you would move it out to the 10th.
What day of the week is that? A Thursday?
That's a Thursday,
Okay.
the second Thursday of September, where it gave you that time to have the advanced poll. Of course, that's kind of challenging the Labor Day weekend in there.
Yeah, no.
So maybe you move it back to the 3rd of September, or you move it out to the 17th of September. I don't know, that,
What about the last week in August?
Have the one advance poll in the last week of
I
August?
think we're talking about the AGM here, I mean, as to when the schedule that.
I think you're better off to wait till September, where people kind of got that mindset that they're
It's
at home. You know, it's September, and I don't know, I think, yeah, either the last week of August or the first week of September.
Kids are back to school, what, the 6th of September or something like that?
I don't know.
It would be the 8th, they're back on
Yeah, probably
Tuesday
the 8th.
after the Labor Day.
Yeah.
So is it better at the AGM before or after the kids are back to school?
I'd say
Well, probably better after,
probably after.
because more people are, you know,
Oh,
yeah, established that they're actually gonna be.
So I think having the AGM on the 10th
Yeah,
is good. And then at least one advance poll the week ahead, like, I guess that would be the first week of September. And then the full voting day, sometime after the AGM, the Saturday, if it's a Thursday, so that would be September 12th.
September 3rd advance poll.
What day of the
let's
week?
not put election into this. Let's
No, let's-
schedule
let's-
AGM and then
yeah.
instruct the administration to build a schedule.
yeah.
Okay.
So let me read two motions, right? Motion to schedule AGM for September 10th, and then motion to instruct administration to prepare an election plan, or prepare a plan to schedule an election as soon as practical. Actually, I have to reword that. As soon as practical, recognizing, I want to get the AGM date in there. Election date.
Well, then the AGM, if we pass that motion, then that
Yeah.
will be the date.
Well, that's the respecting the AGM date, right?
Okay.
So it'll be September.
And that'll be.
Including call for nominations.
that'll
Well,
be-
that's all in the plan, right?
Yeah,
We don't need to say all that stuff, but also saying, accommodating the guidance for public health safety. Right, that's the thing we're saying, is you've got to accommodate this guidance.
and I think that'll be the job of Peter Crawford.
Yeah,
Right, but,
Yeah.
yeah, but we'll get an AGM and Peter
Yeah.
Crawford doing that stuff.
I think that's what we need to do.
Yeah. Okay, so let's vote on the September, or the AGM motion first. I'll put it on, are we ready to go, or is there more
yeah,
discussion?
no.
No,
Okay, so the motion is to schedule an AGM for September 10th, 2020.
And that's a Thursday. Second.
All in favor? Okay. Motion to instruct administration to prepare a plan to schedule an election respecting the AGM date of September 10th, accommodating the guidance from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing for public safety around surrounding elections.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, and what we've left out of that is anything to do with the government study and referendums, and so we're gonna have to fit that in around this.
Yeah,
And that's what we've decided.
it'll be easier when we get the whole picture.
But as it evolves too, and I mean, this way we're committed and we're moving forward and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, they're done.
Yeah,
we're
good,
cleaning up the loose ends for the improvement district.
Okay.
yeah.
So next item on the agenda is an update from the working committee. We've kind of done some of that through here. I don't know what else, Rick, what do you think we should update here? I attended just basically because of the absence of our CAO. I gave an update on that to the committee as to where we're at with that. You know, basically saying that we're in the process of deciding a strategy for moving forward on an interim basis until we understand the implications of the referendum. But the board had not yet had a chance to discuss what that strategy looked like, so I just left it at that.
Did they get the reports that they were looking for?
Yes.
On the dam, is that what you're
Yeah,
talking about?
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, they talked about that they now have all of that reporting.
they
As
still
well
don't,
as the Maple, as well as the Coors, sections.
they haven't got that as we know.
I heard in that meeting that they said that they did get the data,
No.
and that data would say that somebody gave Coors the permission to release the data.
Oh.
Yeah, the data that it would
Yeah.
somehow explain the missing 10 miles of pipe.
Wouldn't you think somebody could just set the thing on their truck and drive the roads and where there's houses? I don't know, like, the thing that's happening, Ted's the only one that's outside of this because we're on the call, but they don't know if you have 40 kilometers of pipe or 30 kilometers.
Oh my God. So we
Well,
don't,
wait a second, they don't have the Coors knows, they were missing
No, it wasn't, they weren't
They were missing,
exactly sure if Coors would have that information.
they assumed Coors would.
Yeah, they assumed, that's.
Yeah, and so did they get that Coors info is what I'm asking.
It was yesterday they said they got the course data, right?
That could have been,
Because I remember at the governance committee, they were saying we need to get.
yeah, we need to get it, so maybe it
We
was
need to get
yesterday.
permission to get it, so it was yesterday that I heard.
Must have been Warren that said that.
Because they were gonna send you an email about the technical thing that you were supposed to ask. Did you get that email?
No, I didn't. So, we should check that.
Yeah, because that's pretty important.
Well, I imagine it was either
Well, that'd be 25% of our system this.
or one of the other surveyors that probably did that calculation.
It was some kind of, they used some kind of, it was a photograph format, an IBS or some kind of weird,
GIS.
yeah, thank you, GIS.
GIS layers.
GIS, yeah. They
So-
thought Coors would have that. Okay.
Anything else, Rick, that you remember from that?
No, not just really that it's kind of uncertain. There's a whole bunch of things that are still undecided. They need the information from our negotiations to know what our wages are going to be, to calculate that. There's a lot of things that are still out there.
It sounded like they were narrowing in on what they had, what they needed.
Okay.
Anything more on this?
No, I think,
Yeah, it's kind of in that limbo-ish phase where they're just trying to get this report together for us by
Yeah.
the end of July, draft form, bunch of meetings to review the report, finalize the report.
right.
I think the next thing we just need to do is say, who attends, like Susanna, Rick, our board nominees? Do we put Janice on that? Do we put Dan on that? Like, I guess it's Janice really,
Should
right?
be Janice.
That we say that we'd like you to attend those meetings. I'm just letting her get her feet on the ground right now in the middle of this billing cycle and trying to figure out what this additional responsibility means.
So can we move on to item E?
Yes, so item E, discussion of modification of water tolls bylaw to include a provision for bulk water sales. I don't know how prevalent this will be, but it arose because a contractor from Union Bay Estates made a request to purchase water from us for road work in Union Bay Estates. And so our public works superintendent, in the absence of our administrator, came to me and said, what do I do about this? And he said, I'd like to just sell them water at the commercial rate, 1.3 per, whatever that is, cubic meter, right? It's in our package.
Yeah, 1.3,
Uh,
1.3 cubic meter.
Right. For metered rates, yes. Commercial rates for our usage rate. No, $1 per cubic meter, yeah. So what became apparent to me was we don't have in our water tolls and other charges bylaw any capability to sell bulk water to, on an ad hoc basis. Right? We presume that there's metered lots and that there's a commercial account or a residential account against which we bill. And so, for the purposes of this particular situation, what we, the administration and the Public Works Department did was they set up the contractor as a commercial account. So they're paying the quarter, or the sorry, I've got the wrong bylaw here, I've got the one that,
Paid quarterly.
this was revised, yeah. It says quarterly and it should be bi-monthly, right? So that they'll pay that bi-monthly fee and they'll pay the water they use. The only difference will be, it will be an estimated billing based on the volume of the truck, right? So each fill will be so many, that's 4,000 gallons converted into cubic meters. And so the Public Works Department will monitor the number of fills and bill accordingly. That's how we handled it this time, but it pointed out that we do not have a provision for bulk water. And the purpose of putting it on here is, do we want to have a provision for bulk water? Will this happen more frequently, less frequently? What happens when it happens again? Do we just do what we did this time and say treat it as a commercial account? Or do we want to say, no, bulk water is, you don't pay an account fee or a quarterly fee or a bi-monthly fee, but you pay some higher number for your the water purchase? Or do we want to do that? That's why it's on here.
Well,
Could I ask a question? What falls under commercial rates? Like, what kinds of businesses get commercial rates currently?
Union Bay oysters and so on.
Yeah.
Union Bay Oysters?
Yeah, businesses.
So Buckley Bay gas station?
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to determine, does Union Bay Estates fall under commercial?
If there was a business, well, they're not hooked up.
No, I know, but this is all work done for this
Right.
meeting center.
And it was, I forget the name of the contractor.
Yeah, I think it.
The contractor came to us and said.
Yeah, I think it's a contractor account is what we need. It's like a contractor's coming in to do this hauling.
Yes, yes. Now this one has been solved, right? We set them up as a commercial business.
Right.
And they're paying their $90 or whatever it is for it's $90 for 2 months. And
Right.
they're paying the dollar
dollar
per cubic meter, right? And so that's how we handled this one. But that's a commercial account, and do we do that each time? Or do we say, no, here's a rate, and I'll just make up a number, $1.50 a cubic meter that is a bulk rate purchase, and you don't need an account to do it.
It's down to water usage rate, dollar cubic meter under commercial rates. You got your residential rates, and below that you got
Oh,
commercial.
here, it's on bylaw
It's
281.
$1.30.
Right, it's $1.30. It's $1.30, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that is, sorry, I have the wrong bylaw in here, but it was.
You lost me completely. What page
So
are you on?
there's no page numbers here, but if you go to the first page beyond the email on the trailer,
There's 2.4.
Okay,
Out here.
you will see
Yes.
bylaw 281, amending bylaw 278. I put 278 in here just because, so we would have the whole thing. So, but it's $90 bi-monthly plus $1.30 per cubic meter. Right, so, do we want to have that, so we've got residential rates, commercial rates. The question is, do we want to add another section called bulk rates?
So under bylaw 281, I think it's fine the way it is.
So
Why
can I ask you a
complicated?
question? This office that Union Bay Estates is building, will it have a metered water?
I presume every
Every new
connection
connection has
in there will have a meter.
Okay,
Yes, and it'll be a commercial building and be charged.
yeah,
for
no, I just
commercial
wasn't
rate,
sure if
right.
it would have a meter. I hoped it would. I wouldn't-
Yeah, any new connection has to have a
They
meter.
have to have it.
Okay.
It's in our bylaws.
So this is for accounts that are going to drive up with a truck and say, I want to fill my truck with water.
I think it's absolutely necessary that we do something to remove the controversy and putting Dan in a spot where, I think that's the simplest thing to do.
Which is what?
Have a bulk rate for people that ask for water. And if they're not hooked up to a meter, then it has to be done differently. They can't become a commercial customer, right? They'll be getting a bulk rate. And
You need a base rate for whatever size the tank is on that truck.
yeah, you charge them by the capacity of the tank, right?
Yeah.
And most tanks are always marked, especially if they're hauling on the highway. So,
And we don't have a meter on our outflow, right?
No.
So
No.
it's gonna have to go by volume of
By the volume of the
vehicle.
tank.
and you can
Whether it's filled or
measure
not.
the tank and get the volume in 2 seconds on your phone. I've done it a lot.
It'll say right on the tank, right on the tag what the volume is.
But
Well, usually.
what amount would we charge?
Well, that's a good question, and
There's labor involved. By our our staff has to be involved in the dispensing of the water.
Yeah, that's true. Would there be a charge, initial charge to give them the water and then a charge on the amount for the water, or try and have it up blended?
That's a valid question.
And where are they getting it from? There's the other thing is, where
Well, it
where
could
are they
be
allowed
any-
to get it from?
Any hydrant.
Well, I think we would say, and I think that's a part of this too, is where do you have to go to get it? Like,
That's right.
in this particular case, they went to the water plant.
Yeah, because
It was filled out at the water plant, because you
here's
can't
the
screw
thing,
it
and
back.
Dan will tell you right now, if they just go to a hydrant anywhere along the run, and they crack that hydrant open to fill up their truck, they're gonna stir up whatever's in those lines, and that's gonna go down the lines to houses. So
We
that's
have a
why I'm
policy
saying
that
they
says
should be going to a certain point to get their water.
other people can't be doing it, only our staff can
Yeah.
open the.
Exactly, but it's like he said, at a fire hydrant on the run, whenever you crack them open, even if they crack them open, that's gonna stir up a line. That's
No, I
why
mean, Dan-
they want them to go to a certain point.
Yeah, that's probably why Dan said to go to the treatment plant.
Exactly.
And that's a good thing, and the other part of it is that there'll normally be somebody there during business hours. And, you know, it would have to be only accessible during, you know, you couldn't want water on a Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock or something, right?
They could set a schedule.
I think, I don't know,
What would be fair?
well, I might make a suggestion that we throw it back to Dan and see what he thinks would be fair. He might understand this a little better than us. I don't think we could be charging $1.11 a cubic meter. I don't know that.
What is it like in other areas, in Cumberland and Courtney, what are
Why
they
not?
charging?
Well, I don't know, Suzanne, if that's enough, or
Right,
like a
Yeah.
cubic meter to me is not really how I think about water, but if I think about a water tank,
Yeah.
it might not be, you know, there could be 10 cubic meters in a smaller tank or something, so it might be,
And how much are they using? That's the other thing.
This was a 4,000 gallon truck, which worked out to something like $23.50 a load.
yeah.
Right? Like, it's
That's what I'm conveying that in my mind to a cubic meter. So yeah, so there probably has to be a flat fee and amount of water used.
Or you, yeah,
Whatever.
Or you
the
blend.
it's X dollars to fill it and X, and then
Whatever
maybe
the-
commercial rates for water.
Whatever the
Yeah,
size-
that's what
whatever
a
the
flat
size of
fee-
the tank is what you should charge.
Well, you could do that, or I think what Rick's suggesting is saying, okay, it's, you know, just make a number up, $100 to pull up, and it's $1.30 a cubic meter. That's the same commercial rate, but it's $100 to pull up it,
Okay.
or $50
Okay.
for each fill, or whatever, right?
okay,
Yeah, something like that. But again, you know, I think we should put it back to Danny and see if he could help us, and then decide from there maybe.
Yeah.
But I don't know, is that a good idea?
I like it.
It definitely should be on here to help, you know, Danny's gonna be put in these situations a lot with what's going
Yeah.
on here. And that, I think, would help him make the right decision to have that included in here.
Okay, so the motion here is to request the Public Works Superintendent to propose an amendment to bylaw 278 to allow for bulk water sales specifying the location.
281?
sorry.
278, 281 is an amendment just for the toll charges, 278 is the base bylaw.
All right.
So amend bylaw 278 to allow for bulk water sales specifying location of fill, hours of operation, and rates consideration cost of water and other costs such as labor.
Yeah.
That's the motion.
Second,
All in favor? Good stuff. So this next one is something that occurred to me in my overly developed sense of doing the right thing and realizing that, you know, every time my automatic sprinkler, every second week my automatic sprinkler system goes off, I am in violation of our water conservation and drought management bylaw. because I cannot set my sprinkler system to run on odd days, or even days, I'm an even number address. I can set it to run on days of the week. You know, I feel good about the fact that my sprinkler only runs for, 15 minutes, 3 days a week, so I'm not using the 4 hours that I'm allotted, right? But every second week, I am in violation of our watering bylaw because my sprinklers go off on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, right? If we look at CBRD and the rest of the valley, their bylaws which are included, or their guidance, this isn't their actual bylaw, but if you look in the package, you will see what they do. Somewhere here. No, I sent it to you guys separately, I'm
So
sorry.
you send it separate.
Yeah,
That's okay.
their restrictions are at stage 1, odd numbered houses water on Mondays, Wednesdays, and they water on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays. And even number houses run on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. And then if you go to stage 2, the middle days of that sequence drop out, right? And then you go to stage 3, it's hand watering only. And so it's really, in stage 1 and 2, our bylaws align greatly except for how we express when you can water.
Yeah.
And I think it would be wise for us to align with the rest of the valley in case there's, you see advertising in town or things on the radio or whatever, that our bylaws align directly with what our neighbors are doing around here. And it would be a simple change. Maybe it's a little more confusing for landowners to say, what are my days again? But we can have that thing on our website that they can print out and put on the side of their fridge or wherever they want to put it, right? That says, here's my watering days. But just to align with the valley. So that's the discussion. I'll turn it over to Trustee Calders to send it around the table for conversation here.
Well, I'm supportive of being in alignment and making it consistent and easy. So, that's all I'm gonna say. Sounds reasonable to me.
Trustee Harrelson.
Well, I can be a little bit facetious about this and say just get out your checkbook and sign a bunch of checks and we'll just fill in the penalties each time. We need the money, but yes, I have to agree with this. If it's a case of the rest of the community in the Comox Valley is using this system, it would be simple for us to turn around and use the same system, and that way it wouldn't be confusing to people that are moving into the area. And good idea to send out a water schedule so that they can pin it on their fridge or wherever if they have an automatic watering system. Yeah, I haven't got a problem with it, but I like the first idea first.
Guess what? Our bylaws don't allow for penalties. The penalty is you cut my water off for 24 hours.
I think we should set a penalty for water. I believe that we should make it simple because, believe it or not, I used to have a fellow that shouted at me all the time when I was watering, and it can become controversial. And if you can't, set your sprinkler system easily, why wouldn't we make it so it's easy so that there aren't issues with it also? I'm in agreement that we set it to make it simpler.
I don't know that all automated sprinkler systems are the same as mine, where maybe some of them you can do odd and even days, but mine, I've looked all over it and said you can pick the days of the week it works on, but you can't pick odd or even.
Yeah. Well,
I suspect.
yeah. Unless you get a real cheap system.
I just do what the guys tell me to do, so. All right, so I guess the motion would be to amend, to ask the administration to create an amended bylaw to reflect this change.
Yep, second.
All in favor? I will write something up that sounds like that. Okay, so I think that is the end of our public agenda, and we have a couple of in-camera items, so motion to go in-camera, turn off video.
Motion to go on camera.
You're seconding it?
Yep, oh no, well, Ted second.
Okay.
All in favor? We didn't pass a motion for that, Suzanne.
Oh,